Welcome to the Seven Crosses series for Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. This is going to be a follow-on from the previous video where I built an end-to-end metro system across the map, which went pretty well, and I was getting my confidence got up fairly high. So what I decided was to jump straight in and put in the second metro line, which is an under and over circular network. I'll be completely upfront. I originally started recording it, but eventually it became apparent that it was going to take a lot longer than I thought it was going to do. In fact, what you're about to see took me about 3.5 hours to actually make. And the final version is version 4. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to run round the track. I'm going to talk about some of the issues and decisions I had to make, and more importantly, a couple of little problems that can be a great source of frustration. And to get the ball rolling, I just want to give you a couple of tips and save frequently. The second one is build in sections, and then when you've got something that looks good, hit the button in the bottom right hand corner and turn it into the final model. Don't try and build the whole lot in one go. That was the biggest mistake I made, and that was the biggest mistake I made. And the other thing is that I'll give you an advance warning. Trying to put a metro into an existing city is an absolute nightmare, and I think I've already discussed this on a couple of comments people asked, is that if you want to have a metro in a city, put it in as part of the initial design process, because trying to get it in around all the existing infrastructure, especially the pipework, which we'll talk about later on, it's just so difficult. and it can be very frustrating. That's the initial tips, and we'll just get straight in because I don't want this video to be too long. I'm just going to start you with this initial area here. You can see it's already being built because this is where I started from. If I go underground, what I've got here is I've got on the left hand side, I've got the metro link for the end-to-end line, which comes all the way out here, and you can see this has already been built. So if you actually watch the previous video, you can see my construction trains have got out to about here. What I will say is the borers are really efficient, and they seem to bore the whole length of the tunnel in one go. And so that is the line going out that way. So what I did is I put the safe station for the second line alongside it, so there can be an interchange between passengers. And what I did is I put the tram station is able to go across the top of the metro stations. Now, for a slight divergence with respect to trams, my original plan was to do a circular, and then I suddenly realized that would be duplicating the metro stations. What I've done is I put a tram stop there for effectively a tram line which will run around this area, and then I put another one here which will for a tram line which will run out around this area. What I've also done is I put in a number of buildings, like I put a fairly large shopping mall in here, and some culture buildings, a cinema over there. I've put a town hall in here, and the idea is to give reasons for the residents to come into here. So if it all goes according to plan, what we'll have is the residents coming in and doing all their shopping in this single mall. Well, that's the theory anyway. This went really well. I laid this out pretty quickly. The only real problem I had here was trying to get the tunnels out under these buildings, because I had to go down. And what happened was that I was pressing to get down, and it took a little while to get through that actual connection. In fact, I've already seen a mistake here. I don't think those... This is one of the frustrations of... Yeah, that isn't connecting. Nor's that. Well, I spotted that. We'll just see now. What I've found is that this one might connect. It can be... We're definitely on... No, we're on the wrong tunnel. Yeah, it's very easy when laying these tunnels. And what I would suggest is that... See, it's not connected again. It's a lot easier if you move in template mode. So one of the top tips I would say is that when you're laying tunnels, is work in template mode, and then you can actually see the connections. And when you've built a section, convert the template. Don't do what I did, as I made a whole section, whole big area, and then I accidentally, I made a mistake, and I clicked on it and actually removed the whole template. That should now connect that line through. On the process of what I was deleting is, I just want to show you here, when you're working going under existing railway lines, be very careful with the delete tool, because the delete tool will delete surface railways even if you're working underneath. You can see I've got the connection here, and what I had to do was build in these sections again with respect to the fixing the railway line here, which if you're playing realistic mode, that will be quite devastating. Let's get back to the direction that I wanted to go. What the metro line does, we're going to go around this way, and what I've put in is a station here, and that runs out round here. And again, another thing I will say is, if you're planning a metro line, put your stations in first, even if you've got to change them later on, like I did over here. Originally this was an underground section coming up around here, but it didn't work, so I had to go back overground. So the first thing I'd say is, especially into an existing system, but I think it also applies for a new town, work out where you want your metro stations to be, and just put these buildings down in template mode, and then you can change to above ground, because you've got to remember you're going to need an above ground section to make the connection to the depot and the construction office. It's not like when you normally build a railway or a road, you start out and you kind of go out like in a ribbon and say, well, I'm going to put a building here. The metro, you've really got to work out where your stations are going to be, because there's all sorts of other buildings that can cause problems like this. I mean, you need an end-to-end station, because even in a circular, you're not turning trains around, but you need one of these to provide the time spacings for your trains. Otherwise, what's going to happen is they could bunch up and then cause problems. So you need to fit one of these in, and of course this has to be underground. Now my original plan was to put it in this center section, but then I realized that this is, you can't build over it, and I think this is something again that you need to be aware of. You can't build over the metro station. So I mean, I could put a building there or something like that. So this is, again, it's something that you do need to be aware of. In fact, you can build over that end. Well, that's okay, it's good to know. The next thing is that we got our transition up from below ground to above ground, and what I found is you've got to allow space for these as well, and therefore you want to put them in a fairly large area. And of course these won't connect directly to the bridges or elevated sections, so you've got to put in a short section here. Another thing I will say about these is, and I want to show it to you because again it was gave me a bit of a headache. If you come into here and press Q to get there, you see this is two sections, right? Now if you come in with the rail delete tool, this is another thing you need to be aware of. I'll be talking a bit more about this later on. You can delete sections by moving along here. It's like the game actually does it, and what you can do is do something like that and leave a little section behind, but you can't delete the above section. So what you do is you delete that, and then you get two buildings suddenly appear like this, and then you've got to delete that separately, and sometimes it won't delete, and then you've got to use the bulldozer to remove it. So again, when you're building these sections, be aware of that if it isn't exactly the right place. So what happens is it comes up here, and then as I said, originally this was an underground station, but it didn't really work because the underground station was a little bit too big, and trying to get it between these two buildings was a little bit difficult. And then what happened is I came out here, and then down here I got underground pipes from my bitumen supply system. That then gave a problem with the transition tunnels as well, because they can be very sensitive to things near them. So what in the end I did is I went for an elevated section, which actually worked out quite well, because I've got a couple of water wells over here, and I was able to put in an elevated footpath here, although I've got an underground one there as well. So that section, and I built this section here, and what happened was I brought this section down to ground for two reasons. The first reason was I was just curious about having a section elevated ground section type run, but of course you've got to elevate it again to get back to here. And the other one was whether it actually makes a difference with resources. So what I've done is I've just set a little bit of a demo up here. Now the top one is the normal electric rail. The second one is the surface metro. And then the remaining two are the elevated metro bridges. So on the left we got the surface track, on the right we got the elevated sections. So what we're going to do is look at the normal electric train. Now what I'm going to be doing is looking at the bottom section, not the what's got to be finished with laying the track. And what you'll see is that resource wise, the actual electric track uses more workers days, it uses the same amount of gravel, it uses marginally more prefabs, and it actually uses a lot more steel for the track when you compare. So this is using 6.7 tons of steel, this is using 4.2 tons of steel. But the flip side is that the normal rail uses only 0.5 tons of electronic components. The metro is 1.7 tons of electro. Now bear in mind this is surface track, it's not the underground track. Well, I'll just do this and then I'll kind of see if I can find a section of underground to do a comparison with. What you've got is that the surface rail is actually going to be a lot more heavier on steel, but will save on electronics. It's also slightly more heavy on the prefabs, but at the same time you've got this heavier cost of electronics, which could have an effect. Now bridge wise, the two types of metro bridge are virtually exactly the same, except for one uses marginally more bricks, and we've got the same amount of steel, same amount of prefab. So if I take that out, I'm not sure I can find 100 meters, and I don't really want of underground track. See if we can find a comparable section of. If I bring this up, now this is, it's not even, let me just measure it and just see. This is about 58 meters of underground. What you'll see is that the biggest difference of all is the massive amount of extra workers. Then you've got 38 tons of bricks. The steel is probably comparable, but of course you've got to use boards. Gravel, you could say, is probably comparable, so is the prefabs. So even the electronics is still comparable with the surface. So the only real benefit of building on the surface is that you don't use boards and bricks, but from the rest of it, it looks to be virtually the same. So again, that's something that you want to consider, especially if resources are tight, is which would be the most advantageous. So like in the early game, maybe building a whole elevated section of metro would be better than going underground. Underground is going to be quite an expensive operation, so we're just going to clear these so I forget all about them. I mean, I'm quite happy with this from the perspective of this series, because of course this is a demo series and we've got to build an underground. So moving on, we built a bridge here. This bridge is servicing the heating plant. The heating plant had to be moved because it was originally here and I couldn't get it between the two buildings, because in here somewhere is a substation which is just here. I can't remember, I may not have put the power lines in. Let me just check. Yeah, I can come back and do that. And now this section here is where we make the connection from the main lines to allow the construction train in and also the trams access. And what I've done is I put a two-way connection here because technically the tram could turn round in the end connection, but I thought, considering this is effectively a closed loop, I thought I'd better put a connection in like this. So what I've done is we got normal electrified rail here, and then the connections here. This seems to be the only way you can connect the two together, and then we've got these connections come into here, which then go through to a power transformer here. And again, I had a few problems putting this together because it was a bit close to this station. And of course, I had a little bit of a problem getting through here. Because my original plan was to come round here, go underground, put the power transformer underground, and then run an underground line through here. And again, it was pipe work. I mean, I could have rerun the pipe work and all that, but in the end, I decided to go for an elevated section because it took a little while to get it through this section here, and this station went through an evolution of being placed in different positions to get connections, and in the end, I decided to go for the angle there. And again, just for the fun of it, I dropped the elevated section down. Now, this section here was an absolute nightmare. My original plan was to have this whole section underground. But if I go underground, you will see the reason why that did not work. Because I had all these pipes here. Now, you can get under the pipes, but the problem is actually getting the connections with the curves. When you're actually putting in an underground section, if you're near a pipe, it gets a little bit upset about the pipe, even though because you're actually trying to get a connection over there. In fact, a good example is here, where I had to break it very close to the rail lines. Even though in theory you are running under the pipes, and if it was a straight run, it would have been easy. But trying to get a curves in through all these pipes and buildings was just too much. But so in the end I decided to come above ground, but as you can see, it wasn't as easy even with the above ground station. And of course, it was further complicated by the fact that this station has to be close enough to this building, this building, this building, and this building. Trying to get the station in a position, I mean, ideally I would have liked to have come in here, curved round, and put the station about here. The trouble with that is it took it too far away from this one and this one. So this station positioning was a bit of a compromise. So what I ended up doing was having a bit of a session, putting the station down, building the gravel footpaths, and then seeing whether the workers could get to all these buildings. And this is the final solution. And then what I did was I came round here, and originally this ran overground all the way to here because it was fairly easy getting it across these rail tracks, although on this section proved a bit of a thing trying to get it across these double tracks and crossovers and into the road. But what happened then is by the time I put in the surface to underground transition, and I also wanted to put in another power supply, the station was almost up about here. So what I did in the end is I managed to squeeze the transition in here, and you can see it actually, the pipes kind of almost run through the building. The game seems to be happy. Whether this is actually going to work or whether it's going to complain, I don't know. It's something we're going to need to find out, because you can see that the game actually let me put the pipes smack bang through the center of the buildings here. And then eventually I got through here and I put the what we call it, underground power connection there, and then we connected up to the station here, and then we dropped down into this section here. And again, originally these rails, these came out around here, but I had to move, and when I moved them I had all sorts of problems with respect to the connection. So that is the full circuit, and that took me about 3.5 hours to build. I was getting pretty frustrated towards the end, but especially with this area, I think it took well over an hour to get this built with different versions. You can see what further complicated it is this area here is a rail construction office, because if you watch the previous video, I actually commented on the fact that the rail construction office was too far away to build a complex metro. Also, if I come in here, something else I realized is that because metros have got 2 tunnels and a standard rail construction office has effectively 4 places, to build one metro line you need 2 borers and 2 ordinary trains to do the various construction stages, because building the tunnel is a 3-stage process. Technically, you could use the borers for multiple construction trains. In fact, there is a possibility that if once you finish a track, you can move the borer on. But of course, what you need to remember is the construction trains are very slow moving across the map. And with a 3-step process, so the construction trains coming all the way up here to get to the connection, it takes a long time. Now, I can live with it with the single track one, which is what we're building from here. And you can see it's getting there. And one thing I will say is the borers always seem to do the entire length. One thing I find I'll show you that's quite amusing is that when these trains are actually in the tunnels, this one is actually laying the final stages. It doesn't actually move the jib when it's actually underground. And you can see it's actually just powering through here. And I mean, this final stage does get laid quite quickly. But when you're actually doing the stage before that, which is laying the bricks, the train will often stop here. And one thing I have noticed is that sometimes the construction train gets a bit confused when it's on the up line, because I think it picks up that the station is directional. And what it does is it comes up, throws its question mark type thing, goes back and then moves forward again. But so far it hasn't got stuck. I think that covers the main layout. Now, just to wind up the video, I just want to talk about a few things, and I've just set a little demo up here. We come to tunnel. One thing you've got to watch out with when you're laying tracks is little bits like this. Now, what can happen? Now you can see these have got connections there, but when you're working underground all the time, what can happen, I'll see if I can reproduce it, is if we build a section of tunnel there, and you can see you can actually delete sections. It doesn't delete the whole lot. If you do something like this, and there, and you can see it will slide between 2, but if you get now, it will delete that and you'll get this. But what you'll find is the electro connector will disappear, because right in here is a very short length of track. And what you'll find is it won't draw from it, because what I've done is I've deleted the little bit of the track that was just tucked in there. And it also applies to here. If you build a section and track there, then if you delete it again, and again, you need to really, when you're deleting something, you need to be there, because if you just move a tiny little bit like that, the giveaway is the fact that the arrow points that way, because in there is that and it doesn't show in template mode. And again, if you tried to connect the tunnel. Okay, welcome back. I think that what happened there was as I crashed, and one thing I've noticed, if you're doing very careful connections down here and you've got that problem with short connection and you drag a line in, the game has crashed. I think when I was building this, it crashed twice. So it could be down to the fact that we're still in the beta test branch, but the game has some sensitivities around with some small connections. So that's something else you want to bear in mind. That's another reason why, when you've got something built and you're happy with it, drop a save. And I think that covers all the main points. The one thing I will say is that when you've finished it, run round and check all your joints. One problem I had over here was I couldn't allocate this job. And when I got back to here, this hadn't completely connected to this end station here, and there was and it looked like it was connected, but it wasn't. In fact, it was this end actually, because the construction train actually built this, but it wasn't fully connected to this station here. So once you've finished, especially the underground sections, run round and double check your work, make sure that everything is connected. Of course, with this build, I can fix it very quickly, especially little short sections like this. But And because, of course, if you're doing realistic mode and then you make a mistake like that, one, it'd be expensive and it'll also be time consuming. Anyway, guys, I don't want this video to be too long, so this is where I'm going to leave it. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Hope you found it interesting. Any other points, observation, feel free to chuck it in the comments. And so until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.